is the Hartford Online Radio Network. 21st Century Audio. Delivered on thehorn.com.
Good evening, everybody. It's Tuesday. It's the Hartford Online Radio Network on thehorn.com, and this is Open for Business, the show that features hands-on business owners, managers, consultants discussing everything and anything that has to do with running a business in the 21st century, and most especially here in 2012. Our sponsors are Gateway Financial Group, the accounting firm of Budwitz and Meyerjack, Sherpa Technologies, CentralCTDental.com, and that's the home of Doctors Camp, Sambor, and Lupini. I'm Tommy Russo, and this is Ken Cook, and our guest this evening is Charley Herbert from... Tell us where you're from, Charley.
Bradley, Foster, and Sargent.
All right. But before we get to Charley, as most of you know that tune in on a regular basis, I always like to start the show off, or we always like to start the show off with a couple quotes. Now, I have a pretty wide spectrum here this evening.
They work.
Okay.
At least I haven't heard the quotes, but the principles definitely work together.
So who should I go with first? Winston
I'll
or
go
Michael?
with the power forward.
The power forward. Okay. But you said that, Winston was. Actually, here we go. Michael Jordan. I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed. I failed over and over and over again in my life, and that is why I succeed. That's Michael Jordan. Cool quote, right?
That works.
Now here's Winston. Success consists, Winston Churchill, folks, success consists of going from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm.
There you are.
Now, are those two tied together or what?
I knew they would. You told me it was Churchill and Jordan. I said, that's parallel.
And I said, absolutely. I love the way your mind works, man, because it's connected at the dot. So, welcome, Charley. We're glad to have you here on board. I know we've talked about this a couple times, and I know Ken's going to give, do a little bit of an explanation. So the mic is yours, Ken.
Oh, my gosh. Charley Herbert is a good friend. Charley is the Director of Sales and Marketing at Bradley, Foster Sargent, which is, if I'm not mistaken, the largest independent financial services firm in the state of Connecticut. Correct?
Yes, pretty much between there might be some bigger ones in Fairfield County, but pretty much between Fairfield County and Boston, yes.
Outstanding. And Charley has been with them since 2003, became a principal of the firm in 2008. And he's going to be able to explain to the entire world why bond prices in Spain caused the U.S. stock market to drop 200 points today.
Oh, so we're going to start out on a light note.
Absolutely.
Okay. Tommy has another quote for that.
But Charley, welcome. My real interest in having Charley here was, one, to tell the story of Bradley, Foster, and Sargent, because I think what they do as a firm is intriguing at a minimum level and fascinating at an upper level. And also, Charley has been an active participant with me in rainmaking and building business through relationships, and he is one of the most successful around at it. So I'm hoping you can share what you do in that realm as well.
I'd be happy to. Thank you.
Good. So tell us a little bit about Bradley, Foster, and Sargent.
Bradley, Foster & Sargent, independent firm, about 28 employees. We've been in business 18 years. It was started by three people. You guessed it, Bradley, Foster, and Sargent. But at the core, and appropriate for this show, they are entrepreneurs. They had successful careers and had, in some cases, worked for large organizations, big banks, and said, I think, like a lot of entrepreneurs, I can do this better on my own. And bought a division of a local company in 1994. And came together and started with just $90 million in client assets, and we've built it up to just under $1.8 billion. And that's what I think makes us the largest independent money management firm in this region. But at the core of it, they are entrepreneurs. So those original three are now 10 portfolio managers and about 15 investment professionals, 28 total employees. But what makes them entrepreneurs and an entrepreneurial culture is the way they manage the business, and we could grow bigger and offer a lot of other things, but they're very aware of profit margins, growth rates, and things that entrepreneurs think about, financing, being judicious with debt if you have debt, and a lot of things that, because they've built businesses before, and like most entrepreneurs, and like Winston Churchill, there's going to be failures, and you learn from your failures, and you learn what debt means, and you learn what really a above average growth can mean. It can be good in good times, but it can hit you in the face in bad times. So that's what I have less to do with the decision making at the firm level in terms of our growth and initiatives. But the three founders of the firm are all still there. Joe Sargent, the oldest, is 82.
Wow.
But at the core, they are entrepreneurs and understand how to build a successful business.
So, Charlie, tell us, what were you doing before you came on board with the firm you're with right now?
I've been in the investment business since '83. Started out as a stockbroker in Hartford. But before this, I was wholesaling for a couple West Coast firms on the institutional side, selling to big brokerage firms like Morgan Stanley and Merrill Lynch kind of firms. So I've been living here but traveling around the country, strapped to an airplane. And in 2002, found myself out of work at the time and said I was in my mid-40s at the time, and I said this is probably a good time to think about doing something less travel-oriented and where I can grow the rest of my career at this firm, where what I was doing is not sustainable into your 60s and so on. So it was fortunate I didn't leave there on purpose, or rather, by design, but like a lot of things, they worked out for the best.
Now, I'm sorry, Ken,
That's all right.
you reference Bradley, Foster, and Sargent all as entrepreneurs. What about you? How do you view yourself? Are you an entrepreneur? Are you an intrapreneur? Which way would you view yourself?
I think a lot of us like to think of ourselves as entrepreneurs, but there's a lot to that, as most, certainly everyone here knows, and most people listening probably know. And I guess starting out as a stockbroker, it was Dean Witter at the time. You're an entrepreneur. You're given a phone and a telephone book, and I was 24 at the time. I didn't really understand it. It was really my own business. I still looked at it as I was working for a big company, and those son of a guns, they don't understand me. They don't pay me enough. All those things, and so I wasn't treating it as an entrepreneurial endeavor. But had I realized at the time, I would have probably stayed in that line of business, because it really was a fabulous entrepreneurial opportunity. But I was just too young and too inexperienced to really see it. So I think I've got entrepreneurial juices and blood, but to try and build what Bradley, Foster, and Sargent is on my own, just being upfront, I don't know that I'm an entrepreneur at that level.
I love the phrase that you used earlier. I think I can do it better on my own. That seems to resonate for so many entrepreneurs who start businesses. Do you have a sense of what Bradley, Foster, and Sargent were doing before they started the firm?
Two of them were in larger banks, and one was Joe Sargent was running Conning & Company, Hartford-based company. He had been chairman there for 20 years, and he was retiring at age 65.
Okay.
And he was looking for something, I think, less intense than running that big company, and something where he could start. And the industry at that time had started to go the way of the big national firms, and I think the founders of the firm saw the opportunity to be more traditional, the way the boutiques used to be, and work with clients directly and building portfolios the old-fashioned way. And even the big.
What does that mean?
Pardon?
What does it mean, building portfolios the old-fashioned way?
Getting to know a client, getting to know Tommy or Ken, and what you're trying to accomplish, and building it in a customized way with individual stocks instead of just outsourcing it into mutual funds or some of the things that are commonly used today, which it isn't any necessarily worse or better, but it's different. And for clients, we think, who reach a certain level of assets, who want to understand what they own and want better control of taxes, that was becoming less and less available, especially in the Hartford market. So they saw an opportunity to really build a firm around that. And a couple of them, as I mentioned, come out of the trust departments of bigger banks, and that's the way the trust departments used to be at these bigger banks. But because of consolidations and national platforms, the banks have really gone away from that.
The other thing that I always find curious in the financial services industry is the level of complexity that they communicate to the consumer or the client with regard to managing money. And they make it seem like it is not necessarily beyond their capabilities, but much more time-consuming than any one individual would want to put into it. Sounds to me, as you're describing the philosophy and approach of Bradley, Foster, and Sargent, that they don't necessarily ascribe to that approach, that they want to get their clients much more involved in the process. Am I hearing that correct? You
are, and a lot of we said to somebody yesterday in a similar discussion that it's not rocket science. I mean, most people have the intelligence to figure out how to invest effectively for their clients, but and a lot of our clients have done that for a lot of years, but they get tired And as your audience and everyone here is undoubtedly aware, you feel like the way the markets have become and the way the world has become, you just feel like you have to be watching the television or computer all the time to stay on top of things. And people, even as smart as they might be, get tired of it. They want to hire somebody and say, hey, I'm willing to pay a little bit of money to have somebody I think is reasonably intelligent, has a good plan to help me do this. But we don't represent or try to pretend that Tommy couldn't figure out a way to do it on his own. If he had the time and the interest, he could probably do it. But people are looking at, it's about balance in life in a lot of things today, and people are looking to outsource what they can, and this is one of those things.
And certainly in this day and age, and with the different types of clients that my firm works with, it is not unusual for me to hear from them that because of the internet, that the benchmark of consumerism has raised dramatically, so that when a client walks in the door, or they might be even prospecting a client, that client today knows a whole lot more than that same client did 1 year ago or 10 years ago. And it sounds like your industry is no different than many of the other industries out there for that reason.
There's no question people's ability to manage on their own is available from largely due to the internet. They can find solutions on their own, but 30 years ago that might have been a bigger problem, but the marketplace has grown so much bigger over the last 30 years because of the increase of wealth, particularly in the 80s and 90s, that even the little sliver that we all have in the market is more than enough to build a business off of. And there are people that say, okay, I understand there's cheaper ways to do it. I understand the internet's there. I could probably figure it out, but you guys have done it consistently. I was referred by a neighbor. They said you've done a good job for them, and I'm more than willing to pay you what you're asking for.
Absolutely. I want to remind you folks that we have Charley Herbert with us this evening, Director of Sales and Marketing at Bradley, Foster Sargent. And if you're not following us on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube, then we'd like you to start in this very moment in time. Now, with that title, tell us a little bit about the outward bound marketing that goes into spreading the word on Bradley, Foster, and Sargent.
Well, that's where I was lucky enough to meet the two of you. And if many of you have not heard of our firm, Bradley, Foster, and Sargent, even though we think we're a medium-sized firm in this market, not an upstart, but we don't spend a lot of money on traditional advertising. It's through organic word of mouth, networking with professionals in the community and who know of people who might have need of our services, and that's where Ken and his little plug for Ken, his peer-to-peer program has been, really strong in terms of his Rainmakers program and really finding ways to build these relationships way beyond what most people are, the way they go about it and what, the industry calls networking meetings. That's way down the food chain from what the three of us have been experienced with Ken, is really taking that to a higher art. And I know, Tommy, we see it as an art, and it's really fun to treat it that way as an art, and really trying to help people at a level beyond what the business relationship you're trying to strike up with them, but try to help them in their life or with their kids. And if you can do that, you're going to really build a bond with them that other people have a hard time doing.
Now, I know that those of us on this side of the table are going to remember this campaign. I'm not quite sure if those on the other side of the table.
Well, he's going to throw a dig at you.
No, actually, if anything, it's a dig at us because it's an age-related thing. The doer's profile. Do you guys remember that campaign?
Oh, gosh, yes.
Right. So the doer's profile. What's the doer's profile on, if you remember the campaign? It was, in magazines, and it would be one column on the left-hand side of the first page of a magazine, and it would say, here's the kind of individual that drinks doer's scotch. So what's, obviously not scotch in this case, but what's the doer's profile on the Bradley, Foster, and Sargent, customer base, client base?
There's really two camps, but I'll focus in on the one I think that gets at the heart of your question. It's people who have made their money and want to hold on to it. People who are,
That's me.
Yeah, in their late 50s, 60s, and beyond, they've worked their whole life. They've come into money in some way
and beyond.
Right.
It's a tough crowd. It is a tough crowd. I'm sorry, Charlie. Keep going.
No, as much as they don't like the fact that they have to invest in the markets because they're so volatile, and nobody's excited about investing in stocks today, but there's very few other options to put your money to use productively.
Are there any other options?
No.
Besides gold? Which is too
expensive
at $1,600 an ounce?
Right, and it doesn't generate any income, and we know a lot of the pros and cons of gold, but you can't put it in the bank. You can't buy bonds. You can't put it in CDs and expect to get anything after taxes and position yourself against inflation, which will probably come in, next couple of years and beyond. So they're forced to take the government and every policy that's out there is forcing people to take more risk. So they want to do it in a way that's conservative with people they feel that have been through these cycles up and down, have got some gray hair, who have got some sort of track record that can validate that they can do what they say they're going to do. And so that's our doer's profile is a pretty conservative New Englander. If you're in the West Coast, it's probably a little bit different story for a firm like ours. But here, there's a big part of the market that's looking for that.
Charlie, you just said an interesting thing. You think the government is forcing people to take more risk. Can you expand on that? How do you mean?
The government wants to get the economy going, so they're going to force people to put money into things that help the economy get going, namely the equity markets, capital markets, real estate. They want people putting their money to use, not putting it under the mattress or in a very low risk investment, which that does not help the economy, the multiplier effect of money going to use.
So you think they're getting away from the desire of people really saving without taking risk with that money. They don't want you to, they don't want you to just buy that annuity, or they don't want you to just buy that municipal bond. They want you to get out there and actively contribute to the capitalization of these huge companies.
Correct, and it's somewhat bipolar in that leverage is what got us into this mess, so it's good for the American public to pay down credit card debt and reduce debt. But at the same time, if they pay down too much debt, and that's what's happened, people have started to say, okay, I can't control my investments, so I can control my debt, and I'm going to pay down my debt. Well, they've gone to the extreme where they're not putting money into the economy. So that's what the government is trying to do, is change that paradigm where they say, okay, I understand I've got to pay down debt, but I've also got to. There is opportunity, and putting it in the bank and CDs is not where that is. So yeah.
Is that what they mean by that? There's an economic term called the velocity of money as it relates to the economy, and that is. It sounds like that's just what's happening now. People are taking that money, and for the first time, we have a positive savings rate in America, but that's slowing down the velocity, the changing hands of money, which is really, we're a consumer-based economy. That's really what's keeping us kind of stagnant right now.
Right. We need people to spend money, but in the context of capital markets and what we do, we need people to invest in companies. And if the companies don't have capital, they can't expand, they can't hire employees, they can't. And then that ties into the real estate market as well. People stop buying real estate. That's also the leading edge of a lot of these problems that many people say until we get our real estate problems corrected, the rest of it's not going to get much better soon.
I think I finally have an understanding of why interest rates are at like 0 to 1%. Because
please take on some debt.
Yeah, I take on debt because it's not going to cost you much. I'm not going to pay you much if you put your money into the bank or the savings account or the traditional CD. But if you put it into something that has the potential higher return, but has a higher risk factor, I'll exponentially let you enjoy the rewards, and I'll tax that at a lower rate.
Yeah, no, and you get to write it off too. It almost seems, now that Charlie's talking about this, it almost seems like there's a standoff between the federal government and maybe the Federal Reserve Bank and U.S. Treasury and big business. The largest capitalized companies right now have hordes of cash on the sideline, and now that you kind of bring this up, it's almost like they're kind of looking at each other and waiting for the other guy to flinch.
Yeah, but I don't get the sense of it being a standoff as much as each of them has got a little lever of control that they're playing with. And the federal government is playing with the interest rate control. And we're playing with the amount of capital available. And are we going to print more and make more available out there, thereby diminishing the value of every dollar that's out there already? And then you have big business sitting over here saying, wow, your policies are not conducive to me putting my money into the market right now. So I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to invest in that new plant, or I'm not going to buy that new facility, or I'm not going to sit here and expand my product line.
Yeah. Well, let's ask the expert. What do you think? Does that make any sense, or are we all
Well, yeah, no, I think the companies, as much as the government is asking them to take more debt, and they've learned a lesson. They've been through a very difficult period, 2007, 8, 9, and there was, massive job cutting, which enabled them to get their balance sheets in position. But and I think they're saying once burned, we're not going to take a chance of overexpanding. And there's got to be proof that I need to. They don't expand until they absolutely have to.
Yeah.
Where in the past they would just anticipate 2-3 years needs. Today they're not. If they're not bursting at the seams, they're not going to expand, real estate wise or employee wise.
And they're going to handle all of that expansion with a variable expense. They're not going to pick up headcount because that's a fixed expense that they can't get rid of over a short term. Variable expense, they can turn the spigot on, turn the spigot off. Contract it out, do anything along those lines. But
once again, I want to remind folks that we have Charley Herbert with us this evening, Director of Sales and Marketing at Bradley, Foster Sargent. Tethering us back in a little bit, how does this impact, in very simple terms, every man? The guys that are running small businesses, the guys and gals that are thinking about starting a small business right now. I mean, this conversation's been great, but again, how do we filter that down? And depending on what network at what time of day you're watching, either things are really getting good out there or we're on the brink of disaster. So, and obviously, at least a significant portion of our listening audience is in that everyman, mindset. Any thoughts on that, Charley?
I think I saw something recently that this is formation of new businesses by entrepreneurs, especially in young people, because the higher unemployment rates in the 20s, in the 30s age group, is stimulating. I don't know if it's unprecedented at all-time high levels, but certainly very high levels of new business formation and entrepreneurs. And I think a lot of schools now are teaching entrepreneurism. People are saying, I don't want to work for the man. I don't want to sit in a cubicle. I want to do my own thing. I want to control my destiny. I know my daughters are that way in their 20s. And so I think a lot of people hope to get some experience, but as soon as they have a few dollars and an idea, and this is a positive thing, it's good for the economy, it's good for the country. That's where the real growth comes from, not going to work for a big insurance company. That's not helping the economy, but if you can start businesses that hire people and have new ideas, those are the seeds of real productive growth.
Well, let's parallel the lesson that you have just explained about Bradley, Foster, and Sargent. They have found a way in an extremely crowded, somewhat commoditized marketplace to differentiate themselves. They pay attention to the individual's needs, and customize a portfolio. Anytime you can customize something to the individual client, that's a differentiation factor because that's not readily available across the board. Two-part question for you. Is that by design at Bradley, Foster, and Sargent with the predisposition that it is a differentiator, or is the differentiation an after effect? And my second part to the question, I'm going to crowd your brain here,
Okay.
Charley. The second part of the question is, as it applies to the young entrepreneurs, what's your thoughts on don't start unless you're differentiated?
Well, remind me of the second part first, because I'm going to take a chance on or take a try at the first part. But yes, the customization is by design. But what's interesting is, as you can imagine, I'm sure this is true of any business, customization will, at some point, you'll start bumping your heads into a ceiling, and that's why organizations grow and become very big, and they'll create scalable platforms where they will outsource it, and that's where probably a lot of firms have started like ours and gone on to become national firms like Dodge and Cox and American Funds, and these companies, for the most part, started out like us did, like we did, 50, 30 years ago. But we've resisted the urge to do that. At $1.8 billion in assets, we are still customizing, and we're only limited by the ability to hire good portfolio managers who know how to do company research and attend conferences and dissect Wall Street research and be able to really build portfolios. We are limited, constrained by finding the right people to bring on. Every 100 or 200 million that we grow, we need another portfolio manager. And some firms would have said a long time ago, this is an expensive way of doing business. Let's just have 1 or 2 portfolio managers, and then we'll just have customer service representatives dealing with the clients. And that's at the end of the day, that is a more profitable model, but we've resisted that. And as far into the future as I can see, that's not the direction we're going.
Okay.
So the entrepreneurism has stayed to and if we shifted our approach, we'd lose our unique, and it's hard to say unique in this business, but if you're describing that as a unique characteristic that we have, we would lose that. And then, it would become somebody else's business. Then we'd sell to a big insurance company or bank, and then we'd lose who we are.
Now, I think I know, but I'm going to ask the question anyway. How does all of that translate to if I'm a client of Bradley, Foster, and Sargent? How does that improve my life by the model that you've just described?
Because in this business, you want to build a long-term relationship with somebody. It doesn't have to be us. It could be there are other good firms. But to the degree you're hopping around every 2 or 3 years because you've become unhappy, oftentimes for the wrong reasons, you've undermined your long-term success because it's probably going to translate into poor performance. And then you don't ever really trust someone. It's almost like a series of bad marriages. You don't trust them. And so to the degree you can develop good chemistry, and in our business, you're hiring us to say, okay, you make the decisions. We're not calling you and checking with you every time we make a change in your portfolio. So you've got to have confidence that person has the ability, and the chemistry truly does evolve where the portfolio manager knows the client, their family, what they're trying to do. And that's a very personal one-on-one relationship. You don't deal with a team at our office. You deal with one person. And so that continuity, I think, is largely responsible for our success and very low turnover with clients.
I was going to ask you that, but you already answered it. That it sounds like your retention of clients is through the roof.
Right.
That's great.
Yeah, it's 1 or 2% a year turnover, which you can't be 0. Yeah.
Is there an industry norm that you can share with us?
I don't know, but I would guess it's something higher. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's fascinating. Just by definition, then, taking the conversation to its natural conclusion, entrepreneurism, size is a defining factor of whether a firm is entrepreneurial or not. Apple can claim to be entrepreneurial, but it's not, as evidenced by Foxconn as their manufacturing site over in Asia. I mean, there's nothing entrepreneurial about Foxconn. It is as big a factory as there is in the world.
And that's what Facebook is most concerned about when they go public is becoming quite a bit larger, but also everybody's all of a sudden become very wealthy, and their drive to be in there writing code for 48 straight hours because this next version of a product they have, that dissipates when if they lose their culture, they're going to lose their market dominance and their growth rate and everything they become.
And the curious thing is, and Facebook's a great example because Zuckerberg is still young enough to remember his dorm room and when he started this. And he knows that there is somebody sitting in a dorm room right now and she is starting Facebook's killer. And he's worried about that. And entrepreneurism does die the more institutionalized and systemized a company becomes. I like your parallel or discussion point of we could have a few portfolio managers and then have a slightly less skilled customer service representative who fields the questions, and they come in, pass them up the chain, pass them down the chain, the communication gets lost, the trust gets lost.
It reminds me of, and though it's a stretch of an analogy, but I'm going to use it anyway. When Home Depot first opened, a store in any marketplace, they would bring their A-team in, and the A-team would be the best in each and every department. And they'd keep that A-team in there for at least 90 days. So when Tom Russo went to the first Home Depot that was up in Manchester, Buckland Mall, and I had the first couple of experiences, I was blown away that these people knew as much as they knew. But eventually, the A-team would move on to the next store opening, and then they would bring in all due respect, less than the A-team. And the customer
C-plus team.
Right, the C-plus team, and it would be anything but the great service that we once experienced. And now you walk into, at least I do, in my experiences at Home Depot are, oh my God, I can't believe that this person has no clue as to what I'm asking him or her, and I'm going to get out of here as fast as I can.
Yeah, they don't even know where the inventory is.
Right, exactly. Folks, once again, I want to remind you that you're tuning in to Open for Business. We have Charley Herbert with us, Director of Sales and Marketing, Bradley, Foster, and Sargent out of Hartford, Connecticut. But before we take a short break, I want to read a commercial from one of our illustrious sponsors, CentralCTDental.com. It's the home of Doctors Camp, Sambor, and, you guessed it, Brian, Lupini. For serious issues or routine checkups, there's nowhere else to go. It's easy to get to. They're on the Plainville-Farmington line. If you call 860-747-5761, You can make an appointment, or you can just make an appointment by going online at centralctdental.com. We'll be back with you in a few moments. Looking forward to seeing you again.
Budwitz & Meyerjack PC is a large Connecticut-based CPA firm with offices in Cheshire and Farmington, Connecticut. Large enough to handle engagements of enterprises with annual revenues in excess of $100 million, yet small enough to cater to smaller businesses and individual clients who expect personalized attention from partners and staff. Client service is the cornerstone of our practice. Our clients have a fixed fee for their audit and tax work. What this means to the client is we're approachable. Personal communication and client services make for strong relationships. Budwitz & Meyerjack, certified public accountants.
Sandits Travel for business and leisure. We'll take you there. Sandits Travel has been proudly serving Connecticut since 1960. That's over 50 years. And we're ready for another 50 years of superior service. Whether you prefer to come in, call in, or log on, we invite you to explore how efficient, diverse, and fun it is to book through Sandits Travel. Save your money and your time with us. Sandits Travel. We'll take you there. Sharper than a marble. Smoother than 60 grit sandpaper. On the Horn. On thehorn.com.
Welcome back. Open for Business with Charley Herbert. Ken will be back with us in a moment. And while Ken is wandering his way back into the studio, I'm going to read a commercial from one of our sponsors, Deepwater Seafood of Avon, just for the halibut. Farmington Valley's freshest seafood is Deepwater Seafood. They will work with you and your schedule. Call ahead, 860-676-9657, or you can even fax in your order at 860-677-2281. Deepwater Seafood will set aside your order for pickup after work. Their hours are Tuesday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 6:30 p.m., and they're open on Saturdays, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Now, what's on the menu? I'm glad you asked. Sea scallops, fresh oysters, fish and chips, soup, bisques, chowders. If you're having a party, it's paella for 12 with a salad. That's all you need. Paella is made with spicy chicken, sausage, scallops, shrimps, and you got it, halibut, or just for the halibut. There's only one place in the Farmington Valley to get fresh seafood, and that's Deepwater Seafood.
Deepwater
Of Avon. Hey, Charlie. I'm so glad that's over.
That every time.
Yeah, well, you're doing it next week, bucko.
I haven't got Brian's voice.
in the history of advertising, there has never been requests for a commercial. We get requests. We get emails for that. We do. I don't know what to tell you. The chat room goes crazy.
They're all shut-ins across America, but they want requests.
But they shop at Deepwater.
Speaking of the shut-ins across America, we do have a chat room, please, and we have a phone line. Feel free to call in or write in if you have any questions to Charlie. And Charlie, as we talked in the break, we're confident that a high percentage of our listening audiences are entrepreneurs. So if one of them right now is thinking, that's an industry that I'd like to get in, what would your recommendation be for them?
The future of the industry is probably one of the better industries in this country because of the aging of the boomers and people's needs for help in retirement. And it's no secret, it's written about quite a bit, but it is a industry with a very good future. The flip side of that is it's very hard to break into. And the industry has not done a good job as far as providing entry-level positions for people to, if they want to be administrative in an office, that's one thing, but they're not necessarily learning the business. How to be an assistant to a portfolio manager, in our case, is really hard to come by because the portfolio manager doesn't himself have the time to work with them and mentor these people. So the mentorship model in this industry, for some reason, is not what it should be. It's talked about and written about quite a bit. Right now, there's 3 people retiring for every 2 people coming into their place.
Really?
So in our case, we have really vibrant, robust internship programs with Trinity and UConn. In particular, Trinity, we have 3 or 4 Trinity students each quarter, each semester. There's 4 semesters a year, including the summer. So we have about 12 to 16 Trinity undergraduates coming through every year. We've had 60 or 80 over the last 8 or 10 years, and so I would encourage anyone who's still in college to, if they're interested in this industry or any industry for that matter, get some exposure through an internship, because that often leads to a job either with that company, but that's your toe in the door. That's the crucial issue, is how do you get your toe in the door? And if you're out of college, or if you're not going to college and you still want to be in this business, the Merrill Lynches of the world, the regional firms of the world still need people, whether it's on an internship basis or purely, it's the old proverbial mailroom. Get yourself in. That's 90% of the battle. Once you're in, if you're talented, aggressive, and you want to learn about the business, you can't help but your personality will be infectious. The owners of that firm will want to help you, and then be in it to help them build their book. If Merrill Lynch has had a program years ago, I don't think they do anymore, but you'd go in and mentor with a successful account executive at Merrill Lynch, and then you'd help them build their book, and then in 3 years you'd go on your own, or if you could join a regional firm, an independent firm, but get the experience to come out of the school or come out of high school and to try to break into this business, with no gray hair and no experience. The people, your target market's not going to take you seriously. You have to get a little bit of experience somehow.
Is there a mentor apprentice program? Because this is something we've touched on in past shows in different industries as an art that's been lost.
Yeah.
I think good entrepreneurs aren't going to find something that's in a box description of what the mentorship position they're looking for. They've got to create it. In our case, we hired a young guy out of college, very talented. He came in as an assistant to our chief financial officer. He was doing accounting work, but he was very talented, very aggressive, and now he's transitioned to a role we didn't even have. We weren't even thinking of considering, but that's what it is. It's a mentor to a portfolio manager. He's an assistant portfolio manager. He does research.
He defined the role.
He in his own way created the role. Yep.
Cool.
He knew what he wanted, and I think he proposed it to some of the people that he's working for now. And he's very talented. He's probably going to go to business school and then come back to the business. Maybe he'll come back to our firm. Maybe he'll go into a Goldman Sachs kind of firm. He's very talented. Probably go to New York. And then a lot of people want to go to the major markets and then come back to a Hartford or a smaller market.
Go ahead, Ken.
How old is this employee?
24.
When he approached the portfolio manager and said, I want you to mentor me. I want to be your apprentice. Not using those words probably. What was the reaction of the portfolio manager?
At our firm, and I'm sure a lot of firms, they want to help young people do well for themselves. But if they can find a way to make it work within the organization, that's a double win. So I think we saw the need, but we weren't quite sure how to fill it. And then he came to us, and I guess people are busy and a lot of things you want to do, and we were probably about the point where we were going to hire somebody from the outside, but he happened to be on the inside, and we said, wow, here's somebody really raw talent, but we can mold him, and much less expensive than trying to hire a seasoned professional to do the same kind of thing. So it was a real win-win, and he's been fabulous, and he's going to go into great things. But the message, I guess, is you got to suggest something that might not be there as an entrepreneur. Identify it and go to somebody that you know that has a successful business.
Yeah.
And if you can do it on the right terms, they'd be a fool to say no.
It's the essence of entrepreneurial success. Find a need in the market and fill it. Whether it's internal in the company as an apprentice and looking for a mentor, or whether it's external, finding a need and starting a business to satisfy it. That's what entrepreneurism is all about.
Absolutely.
That's what we talked about, companies being stretched to the limit, so they need help.
Yeah.
It's not like they're flush with talent and people twiddling their thumbs. Everybody's doing the job of 1 1/4 or 1.5 people. So they need help, and if you can come to them as an entrepreneur and say, I think I can help you and I can do it at a really reasonable rate, they'd be really hard-pressed to say no to that if the person's got talent and good ideas.
Well, if the ratios you shared, the 3 people retiring, 2 people coming into the industry, at some point in time, there's
going to
been
explode.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, the other thing too about and I don't mean to jump in, but the other thing too, having, and Charlie knows this, having an investment firm of my own, not nearly as prestigious as Bradley Foster Sargent, but there's a lot of technology that has absolutely wiped away jobs in our industry.
In what way?
Well, first and foremost, from the compliance standpoint.
Okay.
You can have one person be a compliance officer for an enormous amount of people, because a lot of this is done through, digital media or computers and that sort of thing, where you don't have to have that. We have these SRO things, these self-regulatory offices. You would have to have a person in each one of those offices to monitor every single trade, like on a piece of paper, like look at it physically. Now it can come to that person at a central hub and get approved and then get shot off to the market order or whatever. So, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's just gone away in our industry. And that's one of the things, I'd love to hear your opinion about this. I think our industry is in danger because I don't think, certainly guys like me who have, nothing like, 70, $80 million under management, and even guys like you that are, almost $2 billion, you're still considered, small potatoes, less than 50 employees. I find the regulations now so abusive to guys like us that it almost seems like there's some kind of end around happening where they want all of us to kind of merge together into fewer and fewer options for investment management companies so the SEC can just have an easier day trying to regulate us all. Do you get that sense?
Well, that is right. In terms of entrepreneurs in this business, it's from a compliance standpoint, because of the post-financial collapse and everything the SEC is doing and FINRA and these regulatory agencies, they are making it very hard even for, and as Brian said, we're not huge, but we've got the capital to have people, the cash flow to have a chief financial officer and compliance officer, but smaller firms really don't have that ability, and it is crushing them. And it's the legislation is still being written. It could get worse, and it may. And so 1- and 2-man and 5-man shops are going to find it very hard to, if they can't, they probably won't be able to have it in-house. It's a question of how expensive will it be to outsource it, this compliance work. It's a tidal wave of very draconian legislation coming our way, and so that would make it very difficult for independents to do it. But I still think you can attach yourself to an organization if typically you're going to be part of a brokerage firm, an independent firm. There's national platforms, and most people are in this industry are aware of who they are. But you can be part of them, and they'll handle most of that for you. They might take more out of your cut than they would have in the past. But there's ways. I mean, in any business, these are cycles, and that right now it's particularly onerous because of the financial collapse. But it'll work its way through. And if you're an entrepreneur and committed to being successful in this financial services world, you'll find a way. There's just so much opportunity out there. Almost everyone's a potential customer.
Now, my question is, I know in my industry, and even working with interns, when they'll come through our organization and spend a semester with us, my recommendation often is to look at the major markets, whether it's New York, Boston, Nashville, L.A., Chicago. Same thing with your industry, Charlie? Or right here in Greater Hartford and New Haven, are there equally many opportunities, or do these young entrepreneurs and students just graduating college and graduate school need to look to the bigger markets?
No question. Most of the interns that come through our shop, there's one that we're trying to hire from Trinity. He's from China, exceedingly bright, one of his top students in his class in one of the most competitive high schools in China, and he's got a 4.0 at Trinity. He's a math major, a computer science major, and economics major. Wow. And he had a job with MF Global, and MF Global went belly up, as we remember, a few months ago, so his job went away. So there are people like that are, even if they want to come back to a town like Hartford, a smaller market like Hartford, I think the allure of the just living in the New Yorks of the world, the Chicagos, the LAs, is attractive. But that's where the top financial firms are. There's no question about it, no argument about that. And I think if they could get into those firms, and if they've had internships, many of our interns have gone on to those firms. And a lot of it has been because of the experience they've gotten with us. We know people at those firms for our better interns. We try to help them go down there. We don't have illusions that they're going to come to work because we can't pay them what they can make in those markets. They're not going to get as quick of a ramp up of experience as they are at those firms, where they're going to rotate them through departments. And I mean, there's definitely the attraction of going to the New Yorks and Boston, Chicagos of the world.
But if someone is entering the industry to build a book of business, to build their own base of clients, I would think that it's a function of the relationships that you establish. It's not a function of the size of the market. And admittedly, there are more opportunities for relationships in Manhattan than there are in Hartford. However, you don't need a whole lot to be successful. I mean, you and I have talked about this on numerous occasions. You get yourself a dozen really strong referral relationships, and that can feed you for years. And you just keep cycling and working and being astute as to who they are.
Well, there's a lot to be said for establishing yourself where your network is, and we talk about this all the time in peer-to-peer and rainmakers. But so if you go to New York, what you're gaining in capital is your experience to come back in your late 20s and say, I worked with Bank of New York or some well-known organization in New York, and that gives you the credibility factor. But to go to New York and try and build those relationships, build your own book of business, would be very difficult. And when I started, you could just pick up a phone book and make 200 phone calls a day, and I mean it's pretty much out of against the law today, cold calling. So it's become very hard. That's one of the reasons it's become so hard to build a book, is because what were good forms of doing that in the past have dried up. So now it's more, you need some kind of budget to put on events or do those kinds of things. So relationships are the way you get around that. And to go to a market cold like New York, it's extremely difficult.
Well, you're what I would term one of the top tier of the relationship building people I know. I mean, you epitomize what it's all about in terms of generosity and being absolutely open and trustworthy with people. If you were to give one or more pointers to anybody out there listening that says, I don't understand what they're talking about building, what does that mean? What would you say to them? What's the number one or two things you would suggest they do?
Try to be a little bit more rifle shot than shotgun. I think a lot of people think relationship building is just getting to events and picking up business cards and building a big social network and hoping that people say, gosh, they really are the best thing that's around, and I'm going to go do business with them. I'm going to refer all my friends to them. It's a marathon. It takes time. You have to be, and we talk about this all the time, building your A, B, C, D list. And your A's, you wish you never even had to worry about your B, C, and D's, because your A's is your gold mine that you're trying to really drive your D's to C's, your C's to B's, and your B's to A's. And you need to have skills and ways of working with people and interfacing with people where your A's won't become A's overnight. I mean, on occasion they will, but in most cases it could be good 3-5 years and beyond, where they believe you're going to stay around, you're going to show up, you're not just running through town and trying to pick up business and gratuitously. And it takes it, and we talked about earlier, building deep relationships and getting it. And I get to know Tommy personally and his background, where he went to high school, his family, his kids, and the challenges in his life. And it takes time where I'm even in a position where I can ask you that question. Forget about you giving me an answer. It really takes time where people say, this guy's truly concerned. I mean, I know we're all at the end of the day trying to do business here, but he's truly concerned. He's somebody I can trust. He's somebody who's not leaving town or jumping firms, and so that takes many years.
It does.
But it's a very quality, fewer numbers proposition.
So here's my observation on that, and I'm wondering what you guys think, and for that matter, Dave and Brian. I think a lot of people have the patience to do just what you're talking about, to mine that relationship and spend the time and really get to know. In 3 to 5 years, though it might seem like the longest mile, is a doable and acknowledgeable goal that we're going to set forth. But I think a whole lot more people, and especially a lot of the young Turks coming up, see that as like, you've got to be kidding me.
A death march.
Exactly. Yeah. If I can't get this done in 90 days, I am out of here. I don't give a hoot who you are, etc.
Yeah.
I mean, thoughts on that?
I think it's true. I think the advent of social media has caused too many people to view a relationship as the exchange of bits of data.
Right. I liked you on Facebook. We're the best of friends.
Yeah. And I mean, in the past 5 days, I've had 5 invitations from people on LinkedIn to connect with them. And I don't know them. I mean, my response to them is, thank you for the invitation to connect, but we don't know each other yet. If you want to take the time for us to get to know each other, I think the connection would have some value. But until we're willing to do that, it makes no sense.
But if you're working for
You're in the
Oracle-
minority, my friend, though.
I'm afraid I am.
You are absolutely in the minority.
But I'm like Charlie. I have my core of A's. I have probably somewhere between 15 and 30 really core people that I stay absolutely connected to all the time. And that's where my opportunities come from. And it's not a matter of shotgunning, to use Charlie's term, which I think is absolutely appropriate. It's a matter of being very specific and very focused. I think the other piece that misses with people who focus on relationships is that you absolutely have to have a strategic marketing hat you put on. Because if you do not know who your audience is, if you're Bradley, Foster, and Sargent and do not know that your prime client base are the people that already have it and want to keep it and grow it, then you could be shotgunning 35-year-old middle market managers who are making $70,000, $80,000 a year with 3 kids and barely paying the mortgage and making it month to month. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that person because that's the stage of their professional and personal growth. But that's not Bradley and Foster Sargent's target. So very astute strategic marketing has to accompany relationships.
Absolutely.
I agree. You picked up on something with the social media. I think one of the faults of the news organizations is they don't hear stories like Charlie's, who develops relationships and is wildly successful and has a great amount of trust. What they hear instead is Instagram was just purchased by Facebook for $1 billion.
Yeah.
It's a firm of like 13 guys.
13 guys and 0 revenue.
They had some revenue, but still, $1 billion.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, they certainly overpaid by a magnitude of
at least 2.
Yeah, of at least 500 probably. Merely so the other guy, at Twitter or at Google couldn't buy him.
Yeah.
And so that's what people think making it in business is create something where you don't have to know anyone. They just have to use whatever I create, and some enormous bucket of money will fall into my lap from other people I don't know, and then I'll be wonderfully wealthy, and now I'm a business god.
I really, really wish a lot of the younger generation had experienced just a taste of the dot-com burst in the late 1990s, because so many business plans on napkins at cocktail bars. Unbelievable. And how many millions do you need? Sure. It was insane.
They used to have like .com bust parties for all the ex-employees that like went in there and like, last week they were worth, $30 million. This week they're worth $30.
I mean, at that
amazing.
stage, I knew a lot of VCs in the Boston marketplace because I lived in Boston at the time. And I remember the throw-around phrase when it was really blowing up was the last companies that ever got any investment capital. They turned around and said, I felt like I was on the last helicopter out of Saigon.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they felt like the war was blowing up around them and just get me out of this place with my money intact.
Yeah.
And, that, I think, is unfortunate because it's repeating itself. Memories are too short.
Well,
where we
time. Well, we still have a few minutes, and I know we've got one segment that we want to do. But I want to ask Charlie. But one of the things that's impressed me about you since almost the first day we met, thanks to Ken Cook here, is your commitment to nonprofit, your commitment to helping the community. So first off, want to applaud you and thank you for doing just that, community service, if you will. But the question here is, how important do you feel beyond just the giving of your time and energy? Is it for a business to be able to be involved in those kinds of community service related projects?
There's two sides of the question. One is what, from an entrepreneur standpoint, especially younger people who think, well, I've got to be involved in the community because that's how I'm going to build my business. That's how I build my network. And that, if you go into it with that orientation, you probably won't be successful. And you'll be going through the same motions as a person coming in from the other angle, but there's the genuineness will be lost. People will understand, you're just there to make more connections. And I mean, you have to have a desire to do that, number one. But so that's the first side. The second side is, though, I think companies, clearly have a responsibility. If they're going to be in a community and benefit from being in that community, they have a responsibility to invest back in that community. And I remember Indra Nooyi, from the CEO of Pepsi. She said, we're not responsible to only our shareholder. We're responsible to our competitors, our employees, suppliers, and one is not necessarily a higher priority than the other. It's this idea that at the end of the day, what's good for the community will benefit her company. But if you focus on the shareholder first, foremost, and only, you won't. It'll seem like you're putting them first, but at the end of the day, they won't get as much benefit as they will out of a more holistic view of things. And so we as a company, we give back to the community in terms of employees volunteering, but also quite a bit in terms of sponsoring nonprofits in the area. But I'm drawn to it. I probably had some involvement on my own, but my daughters honestly have drawn me into it probably way more than I ever would have, and I think they got that from my wife. But I'm involved in a couple of organizations, Catholic organizations in particular, in the Hartford area, Holy Family, the Passions Retreat Center in West Hartford, the Office of Catholic Social Justice Ministries for the Archdiocese of Hartford. I'm on the board of both of those organizations, and I really feed off of the getting involved with these organizations. Like in any of these good relationships, you get more out of them than you give. You could possibly give. The more you give, you get 2x out. It just works that way. But my daughters, my older one, who went to Holy Cross, after Holy Cross College, went to work for Not for Sale in San Francisco, which is a nonprofit that fights human trafficking around the world. And human trafficking is gaining a lot of visibility today. There's a major event at Yale coming up in a couple of weeks. And but this was started by a professor at the University of San Francisco, and she got involved in college, but then got a full-time job with them out of college. And we talked about social media a few minutes ago. It's amazing what a small organization can do now with limited resources and the impact they can have internationally through social media. You get friends groups, and you can raise money. You can advocacy awareness, and that's the big issue with trafficking now, is not so much arrest all the bad guys, but raise awareness, change people's buying habits from buying products that are made by slaves around the world, and that's how you really move the needle. And their involvement, and my younger daughter's still in college, but she's doing a lot of similar things.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife got involved with Not for Sale, and she was the Connecticut state representative, taking my daughter's place when she went west.
Wow.
So it's really been a family thing it's been fabulous to do together.
Yeah, it is rewarding.
That's great. It really is good to hear, and hopefully inspirational for those that are tuning into us this evening. I couldn't agree with you more. Ken, the clock is ticking here, and I know
I
that...
got 3 questions I close with, Charlie.
Go ahead.
With thanks to some thanks to James Lipton from inside the Actors Studio. If you were not doing what you're doing now, what job would you like?
I would really be, I think, right now, the same daughter in California, we're setting up a little social enterprise, and I really get jazzed by these things where they've got Not for Sale has something going on in Peru, an effort in Peru to rescue trafficked people. So we're talking about creating a venture that would incorporate some of these people that have been rescued in Peru, some manufacturing in El Salvador, taking women off the streets that have been trafficked in a manufacturing facility, and then but running it from here. So I think you can create businesses that are new models. They're social enterprises where you share the benefits across from all the constituents in the business model, not just the owners of the business model, and everybody benefits. And I think there's a lot of leverage there in terms of impacting the community. You can make a living doing it yourself. And I mean, to your question, if I wasn't doing what I'm doing today, I'd have to have a few resources in the bank to attempt some of these things. But if I didn't have a family to support or kids to get through college, I might be able to do some of that sooner than later. But I think that's where I would be.
All right. Second question, what would you absolutely not want to do?
I think I'm glad I never ended up in a really big company, big corporation. And coming out of school, that looks, a lot of times our parents worked at these big companies, and we see that as a natural road to go down because it used to have security.
Not so much.
It's 5 days a week. I could go home and play softball at 5 o'clock, and really high quality of life. And it's all those things have disappeared. You're working harder than a lot of entrepreneurs are working, and your job security is not there. Your retirement benefits are not there the way they used to be. So I'm glad that I never ended up in. And my dad worked for a company where we moved around the country quite a bit. That was the main reason I didn't go that route. But I think I'm very glad I never ended up working for a very large company.
Cool. And last question I've got for you. It is now April 10th, 2013, and there is a front-page article on the Hartford Business Journal profiling Charley Herbert and Bradley Foster and Sargent. What's it say?
Bradley Foster and Sargent has, this will sound quaint, but delivered it, done what it said it's going to do. We don't oversize or outsize our promises, what we're going to do for people. We're very upfront in terms of what we think we can accomplish, and that we've not disappointed our customers and our clients.
The entrepreneur's lesson of the day, deliver on the promise.
Absolutely. Thank you, folks. Charlie, great job this
Thank you,
evening.
Charlie.
Really glad to have you on board. Ken, it's always great working with you. Remember, you're tuning into Open for Business on thehorn.com, the Hartford Online Radio. We will see you next week.
Thanks, Brian.
And on the Horn, we guarantee 60 minutes every hour, or your money back. On thehorn.com.